In sports, we love to discuss how past stars would fare against the new. Jordan versus LeBron, Messi versus Maradona, and Muhammad Ali versus Artem Lobov. The list goes on. MMA, despite being a relatively young sport, is no different, with people wondering what it would be like to see the greats in their prime face off against the best fighters in the world today, and I'm no different. If time was not an issue and we could pick any two fighters from any stage in their career, these would be my top 5 must-watch fights. Now, I realise that these guys have fought before, but that was a very different Arlovski to the man who went on a 6-fight tear to win and defend the UFC Heavyweight Championship between 2002 and 2006. The reason I put these two together is because of the similarities between the two fighters' come-ups. Most of us should know Ngannou's story by now. He's a physical specimen whose imposing figure and size left a devastating trail behind him as he went on a 6-fight winning streak of his own, consisting of 5 knockouts and 1 submission. Arlovski in his prime was no different. His sheer size and scary demeanour was frightening even for a UFC heavyweight, and he often had opponents beaten before he stepped inside the octagon with them. On this 6-fight win streak, Arlovski had 4 first-round knockouts, a second-round knockout, and a first-round submission that was a result of a first-round knockdown. The man was truly terrifying, and it's for this reason that I would have loved to have seen this Arlovski fight the equally terrifying and powerful Ngannou. This fight would have been truly incredible. Without a doubt, Royce Gracie put Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the map. The martial art would be nowhere near as popular as it is today if it weren't for the incredible performance he put on at UFC 1, submitting all 3 of his opponents to win the inaugural championship. Jiu-Jitsu is still well and truly alive in the UFC today, although those who use Jiu-Jitsu as their primary weapon have not been as successful in recent times as strikers or all-round fighters. One exception to this, however, is Demian Maia, who has actually found more success in focusing solely on submissions than he did earlier in his career when he tried to use striking also. Demian Maia and Royce Gracie both fight at 170 pounds, and it will be a jiu-jitsu masterclass to watch these two fight. While it may not be the most exciting fight you could imagine, for the lovers of the ground game in jiu-jitsu, this would be the best example you could find in MMA. Plus you know Joe Rogan would be going absolutely crazy in the commentary booth over it. This is one of the biggest stretches for me to put together, but I really think this would have been an incredible fight. Alistair Overeem is one of the greatest strikers in MMA history. At one point in his career, Overeem was the Strikeforce and Interim Dream Heavyweight Champion, as well as the K1 Kickboxing World Heavyweight Champion. However, long before we saw the rise of horsemeat and Ubereem, Alistair used to fight at 205 pounds, where he displayed striking as clean as his supplement intake. His striking was still just as devastating as his heavyweight days, however, and this was before his long career of fighting against the best of the best had destroyed his chin. He was probably the only light heavyweight who could have matched Anthony Rumble Johnson for his power and striking ability. Rumble himself moved up in weight classes, from 170 pounds all the way to 205. He is one of the most devastating strikers in the history of the sport, brutally knocking out all of the top light heavyweight contenders and only falling short at the final hurdle. It is safe to say that this matchup has the potential for fireworks on the feet. Now, at first, this doesn't seem like it should be on the list when you simply look at the achievements of these two fighters. Neither of them have been a UFC champion, and it doesn't really do much for the GOAT conversation. However, these two fighters are absolute savages, and in my opinion would produce probably the most bloody and entertaining UFC fight in UFC history. Diego Sanchez has a long history of absolute wars in the UFC, against the likes of Clay Guida, Jake Ellenberger, and Gilbert Melendez. Justin Gaethje has one of the scariest mentalities I've ever seen from a fighter. His only goal is to make fights as violent as possible, and he has sure shown that in just 2 UFC fights. I could go on about him for hours and have talked about his mentality in a previous video, so you should check that out. But this is the perfect match for an opponent as aggressive and with as much heart as Diego Sanchez in his prime. This would be a guaranteed fight of the year, with neither fighter ever backing down, meeting each other in the middle and throwing until one of them broke. It makes me so sad that we couldn't have seen this. Fedor, the last Emperor Emelianenko, is widely considered to be the greatest heavyweight of all time, if not the greatest of all time, full stop. Although he never fought in the UFC, he dominated Pride when it was the most talent-filled organization. Save for a dubious doctor stoppage that should not have been ruled a loss, Fedor went 9 years and 37 fights before he suffered a loss in MMA. In that time, he beat fellow legends such as Antonio Nogueira, Mirko Krokop, Mark Hunt, Mark Coleman, and Tim Sylvia, making him one of the most dominant heavyweights ever seen. Cain Velasquez is in that conversation too. Cain has been plagued by injuries his entire career, which brings forth the scary thought as to whether or not we ever truly saw him in his prime. Boasting incredible cardio, Cain was able to put unstoppable pressure on anyone he came up against, winning the UFC heavyweight belt twice and only suffering 2 losses his whole career. While Cain was never able to get truly up and running thanks to his injuries, it would have been amazing to see him and Emelianenko in their primes face off against each other and decide who truly is the baddest man of all time.